Hi there, in this lecture we're going to go over the basics of how a program runs, and we're going to talk about variables. So let's get started. Here from the previous lecture I've printed to the screen hello world. So this is basically a command, a method more specifically in Python. It's called a method, and using this method we can print, okay? And so if I use the same method to print something else, I can either use single quotes or double quotes, and we'll get into the details of why you would use one over the other later. But to print something, you can use any of these options. Let's print that this is the next statement. All right, and so if I run this program by using this green button on the top right, notice, let's click on that. Notice it prints hello world first, and then it says that this is the next statement. So as you can see, the Python interpreter interprets this line by line, okay? The execution of a program happens line by line. So first this line is processed, and then this line is processed. It's sequential. And there's this concept of object orientation, which we're going to get into later, and you'll see how you can have your program run. It'll still run procedurally like this, but it will be running in a more organized fashion. You can decide what lines you want executed first and so on. That's for later. But the basics of any program is understand that it runs sequentially, line by line. And what is a computer program? A computer program is basically instructions that we give to the computer to execute. And the computer is supposed to execute those instructions in the order in which we specify. So printing like this is not very useful, right? And there's only so much you could do with printing to the screen. Oftentimes you want to save data into containers, which later you can utilize that data, right? And so to be able to do that, you need to involve something called variables. And a variable is basically a container. That's what I want you to think of it as. So if I define something called a number, and this is just a variable that I've defined, and I have to give it a value, I can actually use the equal sign and give it a value, such as, the number 77, okay? And so this variable now will contain the number 77. This 77 is being assigned to this variable called number. And this variable could be anything. It's not specific to number. I can call this hello, my name is. It doesn't really matter. I just chose to call it number because that's essentially what we're putting in here, and we can put in any number that we want, okay? And on the next line here, the value of this number variable will contain whatever was assigned to it. So in basic math, the equal sign is used to check for equality, all right? But in a computer program, the equal sign is used for assignment. We are assigning this right value to the variable on the left, okay? So if I print to the screen this variable, I can just type in number like that, okay? Without the quotes, all right? Notice I just used a variable right there. So let's hit run, and notice the third command is right here. It executed, it printed. Well, rather, this is a fourth command, right? This is not the third command. The first command was this, then this is the second line of execution, this is the third line of execution, and this is the fourth line of execution. And by this point, the value of the variable number is 8852, and that is what is printed. Now, if I was to change this to print in quotes number like that, what do you think is going to be printed? If you think that the word number is printed, then you're right. So let's run that and notice number. The word number is printed rather than its value, because by putting quotes around this, we are turning it into a string, which is a series of characters. And it's not able to evaluate what number actually is. All right, so to be able to evaluate what number actually is, we want to make sure we use this exact value, this variable in here without the quotes. All right, so variables are basically containers of data. And so if I change this number later to something else, such as 22, and then I print that variable again down here, then it's going to actually print the number 22 after it prints 8852. You can run this and see for yourself. And let's say that I change this variable to be weight. So this weight variable, and it could be anything again, I'm repeating myself, variables could be named anything you want. I just chose to name it weight. And so this 22 is assigned to this variable weight. And later what I could do is add both of these variables together, all right, the containers. So we'll do number plus weight, and I can assign this expression, right? This is an expression. I can assign this to the value answer or whatever, all right? And so now we have another variable called answer, and this answer variable contains the values added together of number and weight, all right? And I can print to the screen the variable answer like this. And so let's run this, and you'll notice that there's the first line, it prints, and then it prints the number 8852, and then it doesn't print the number 22, because guess what? We're not asking it to print the number 22. We're asking it to print the answer, all right? And the answer now contains the values added together. The number variable and the weight variable is added together and given to the container answer, container or variable, whatever you want to call it, and we're printing that to the screen right here. And this is the value of adding the numbers together. So as you can see, in programming, variables serve a very, very important purpose. And I just want you to think of them as containers at this point, containers of data. And now these are numbers, right? But if I was to use a variable such as name and my name is Imtiaz, so I'll just type Imtiaz. Now this variable it doesn't contain a number, it contains a string. A string is basically a series of characters. And so I can print to the screen name like that. And it will of course print my name on the third line right here. I can enhance this by saying that this is my first name. So I'll do first underscore name. When you have compound words like this, two words, and you want to make a variable out of them, make sure that you put an underscore. This is a naming convention for variables that's used in Python, all right? So first name, these are essentially two words, and I'm putting an underscore here. So this is my first name, and then last name, I could do last underscore name, and my last name is Ahmad, okay? And so what I can do now is actually, I can create a variable called name and assign it the addition of both of these names, or concatenation, and you're gonna know exactly what that is. So I could do first name plus last underscore name, and now the name variable is going to contain the concatenation or the combining of the first name and the last name together. And so if I print this now, let's run this program. Notice it prints my first and last name. Now, notice that it just clubbed both of these names together, just jammed them together, and that is why it's printed like this. There's no space between the names or anything. If I wanted a space, I would just add a space character at the end after the word Imtiaz, right? Or I could have put it before the word Ahmad, and it would do a similar thing. And now, if I run this program, notice it gives a little space between what's printed, because the variable name now contains the first name with a space and then the last name. So this process of adding these strings together in programming is known as concatenation, all right? We are concatenating these two strings together. And what's a string? A string is essentially a series of characters. This is different than a number. Now let's say I wanted to print to the screen that Imtiaz Ahmad weighs 200 pounds. And I wanted the number 200 saved in a variable. So what I could do is I can create another variable down here, and we'll call it sentence. We'll say first name plus last name plus weighs a certain, 100 pounds. And now I can print this sentence. And let's hit enter. And notice it says Imtiaz Ahmad weighs 100 pounds. Now things get a little tricky when we change this to an actual number. Let's say that I have a variable here called weight. Well, I'm 200 pounds rather. I grossly went on a diet here on this sentence. So 200 pounds. So if I wanted to engage this variable in this sentence, what I could do is I can put a quotations here to end this set of characters, and then put a plus sign here, and then use the word weight or the variable weight here, and then put another plus sign and put quotations here like that. But you'll see that there's a problem that we're going to run into. Let's hit the play button. Notice it run into an error. And notice the exit code is no longer 0, it's saying 1. So we have an error. So what's it saying? It's saying that can only concatenate str, right? First of all, it gives us the file in which the error occurs, which is our application.py file. And then it says that it's on line 9. So line number 9 is right here. So on line 9 is where the error is. So it gives us plenty of information as to how we can spot where the error is. And then it says right here, type error can only concatenate strings, not int, to a string, all right? So what this basically says is we're trying to concatenate here, but these are not all strings. We've actually got a number in here. And so to turn this number into a string, what we need to do is use the method str, and we're going to get into what methods are later. But notice that I wrap this variable weight around this method called str, and make sure you use these parentheses. And what this does is it converts this from an integer into a string. All right, it converts it from a number into a string data type. And we're getting into the concept of types now in Python. So these are character types, these are known as strings. They contain a series of characters. But when we talk about numbers here, this is a number type. And more specifically, in Python, this is known as an integer. Okay? The variable weight is an integer data type. And so to concatenate strings with integers, I want to make sure that I convert this integer into a string. And to do that, we use this str method. Okay, and now this should run perfectly fine. So let's hit the run button and notice, there we go. MTSMod weighs 200 pounds. So you can combine data types that are the same like this. Since we had first name and last name, these are both strings, we could combine them with no problem. But as soon as you involve a different data type, which is an integer, we run into the problem. So you have to make sure that the type is changed to a string. Now this doesn't have to be just a variable. I could remove this and put the number 200 just like this, and we're going to have the same error. Let's hit run, and notice we run into an error because the Python interpreter sees that this is the number or the integer 200, and that will not concatenate or club together with the string statement that we have here. So we need to convert this into a string. So we use the str method and put the number inside of that str method, and now this will work fine. Now again, this is a basic concept. If I change this to 300, I change the variable weight to 300, but of course that's not going to register here because we are no longer using the weight variable. So I'm sorry if I'm repetitive, but these concepts are very important to learn at this point, especially if you're new to programming. If you already know programming, you might as well just skip this lecture because these concepts that I'm discussing here are the same in all programming languages pretty much. So we talked about variables and the assignment operation. And what is the assignment operation? It's this equal sign. And I showed you that you can combine values together using this plus sign. And I also showed you that if the data types don't match, we're going to run into an error. So you need to make sure that the data types match to be able to combine strings like this. And often what that includes is turning a number, or an integer rather, into a string. All right. Now we talked about strings and we talked about the integer data type. So in the next lecture, we're going to get into more details about what the different data types are in the Python programming language. And we're going to talk more about what types are. So let me wrap it up. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next lecture.